Hey class, so we're going to talk a little bit about chapter 2 now. And in chapter 2, we are diving into ethical theories. And what are ethical theories? And basically, they are philosophers' answer to the question, what is good versus what is bad? They had to sit and think. They were trying to apply a theory to all scenarios where you could take that theory to heart and you could decide in any situation what you were doing is ethical or unethical, good or bad. And there's a lot of different ethical theories out there. A lot of different people have come up with ethical theories trying to answer that question once and for all. How do you know what you're doing is good or bad? And there's so many different ones because I don't think anyone's found the perfect answer. If anybody had found it, you'd probably would have heard about it a long time ago. There's always the golden rule, treat others as you would want to treat yourself. But now there's a new rule, treat others as they want to be treated, would want to be treated, because sometimes how I want to be treated doesn't mean other people want to be treated that way. Um, so there's all sorts of different theories, and the book kind of narrows it down to three and then sneaks in a couple other ones under that. But there's two main camps of theories that I want to talk about. And by camps, I mean two different types of theories. One type of theory is consequentialism, consequentialist theories. And these look at, as it sounds like, the consequences. So, consequentialism, consequences. They want to know what the end result of the action you take is. So, is the end result good or is it bad? So, they're only looking at the end result, not what it took to get to that end result. And then there's non-consequentialist theories, which look at the action itself. So, was the action you took good or bad? They do not care about the results. It doesn't matter what the end result is, they just look at the action itself. So let's say, I don't know, let's say like an active shooter situation. If I had a gun and I shot the shooter before he could shoot anybody else, a consequentialist person would look at the end result. I stopped somebody from shooting other people. So that end result was good, they would deem it ethical. A non-consequentialist person would look at that action, shooting another person, and they would judge that action. So was shooting another person necessary? Was that ethical in that scenario? You shouldn't take somebody else's life, you shouldn't shoot other people. So they'd probably look at that action and say that wasn't a good action for me to take to be an ethical person. And that's an extreme example. And that scenario, it obviously sounds like one is better than the other. But there's plenty of other examples where sometimes looking at the action is more appropriate than looking at the consequences and vice versa. So we're going to get into a little bit. So let's talk about virtue ethics first. And this would be a non-consequentialist ethical theory because it's just looking at the actions. And but the main point of the theory is asking, is what you are doing virtuous? Is what you are doing good? Are you being a good person? Are you showing character that is good? And that's basically it's all taking the values and the virtues of an individual and applying it to the situation. Would a good person do this? Is basically the questions asking, or would a good person do this? Or what would a good person do in this scenario? So you're looking at the virtues of the person or the business itself. And for some reason, the author throws egoism in there. I think it could have gotten its own separate section. I probably would have, yeah, pulled it out into its own section. Egoism is a different ethical theory, so don't get it confused with virtue ethics. Virtue ethics looks at how virtuous you're being. Egoism is kind of a separate ethical theory, and it is very different. It is the idea that humans are all selfish and that we are selfish creatures and we will always just do what is in our best interest 100% of the time. And this is very often the case. A lot of people do just do what is in their best interest. But there's also a lot of examples of people doing things for other people that has no benefit to them. And that's why I don't think egoism is a great ethical theory. It is one that's been talked about a lot in the realm of ethics, though. So it's a good one to know, but it's not a great one to, I think, apply. If everybody just went around and said, "Oh, I'm being ethical by doing what's in my best interest," because that's what egoism is. It's the theory that that makes it ethical if it's in your best interest. That's not always true. Not everything in your best interest is an ethical thing to do. So it's an interesting theory to think about and talk about, but I don't think it's very relevant um, as a good ethical theory. And then we get into utilitarianism, which is a very, very popular um, ethical theory. It is one of the ones you'll hear about if anybody ever mentions ethical theories to you. Utilitarianism probably pops up because it's one of the big ones. But what utilitarianism is it is a very consequentialist ethical theory, meaning it only cares about the end results. So, what you have to take into account when you're deciding if something is ethical or unethical is what is the consequence? What happens at the end of the action? And you have to take into account everybody who's affected. So that's one of the biggest mistakes of utilitarianism is not taking into account all the stakeholders. So how are people impacted? How many people will be happy because of the decision? How many people will be unhappy because of the decision? Are more people happy versus unhappy? You have to take that into account. And so you're trying to maximize the happiness of the most amount of people. So that's how you make an ethical decision, is by maximizing happiness for the most amount of people. And the thing is, it has to take in different levels of happiness for different people. So if you drained my bank account and gave everybody in the world a peanut, I don't know, I'm coming up with a weird example. My unhappiness is going to be extreme, right? Because you took all of my money away. But how much is your happiness going to go up from just getting a single peanut? Maybe a little bit, maybe not at all. So it kind of look at like, okay, if maybe the whole world was a bit extreme, but like if everybody in the US got a peanut because they took all my money, would the max happiness of everybody go up more than my unhappiness? I don't know. So that's something you have to weigh, is like, how unhappy are you making people versus how happy are you making people, and weighing the different levels of happiness for those people. Um, a little bit of a con of utilitarianism is obviously when you're only looking at the consequences and not at the action, you can justify anything. So the killing people, murder, bombing cities, etc. All that's very justified under utilitarianism as long as more people are happy than unhappy. So there's a lot of people out there, and their happiness is, um, relative. Trying to judge how much happiness or unhappiness you're creating is also very difficult. And so when you're applying utilitarianism to like any ethical issue, um, let's say like healthcare access or environmental regulations or something, it's really difficult, A, to take into account all those stakeholders, and then B, determine how happy versus unhappy you're making people by making a decision one way or another. So those are some of the cons of utilitarianism, but it is an interesting theory that, like I said, you want to really look at the consequences to the people. So what are the consequences? How do you make them the best for as many people as possible? So the final ethical theory they talk about in this chapter is principle and rights-based ethics. And this one's interesting to me because I mostly know it as Kantian ethics. Immanuel Kant came up with the theory, and that's how I understand it and know it, but they put it under what's called principle and rights-based ethics. But the theory is the same. That if you believe in this ethical theory, you value the individual. You think that humans all have rights and and different duties, and protecting those is the most important thing. It is a non-consequentialist theory, so it is only looking at the action, not at the consequence of the action. So it doesn't care what the results are, it's looking at what you're doing. So Immanuel Kant, he had this thing he called universal maxims. And what this is basically, if you made this a rule for the entire universe, would it be a good rule or would it be a bad rule? And the example they give in the book, a good one, is lying. If you would lie, would you say that lying is good for everyone to do? Is it okay for everyone in the world to lie? And the answer is no. That would create chaos. That would be terrible if everybody in the world just only lied all the time or just lied a lot. So that would obviously be bad, right? So you couldn't make that a universal law, and therefore it's not okay to do. So he looks at his ethics like saying, would this action be okay for everyone to take? And if it's not okay for everyone in the world to take the action that you're taking, then it's not ethical. It has to be universally applied to everyone. And another big thing he is into is treating people as an ends, not as a means to an end. So, using, I think they point out child labor, for example, is using people as a means to an end. It's bad action, even if it produces the most amount of good in the world, by boosting the economy or whatever and giving those children money. Utilitarianism might say that, hey, there's all good consequences to employing children, so it's ethical to do that. Kantian ethics would look at that and say, no, you're treating them as a means to an end, and it's wrong, because you can't treat people like that. They have a right to be children and not have to be and doing labor like that. So it would look at the action of employing children versus the consequences or the results of employing children, if that makes sense. So that's a quick rundown of those three theories. What you'll be doing in multiple cases in this class is applying two of those three theories, in some cases, to different issues to kind of look at it from different perspectives. Because, like I said, I don't think any one ethical theory is correct. There might be different approaches. There might be different ways to look at different scenarios. And so it shouldn't always be just looking at the consequences or always just looking at the action. Sometimes you have to take both into account. And so some of the questions we'll be looking at kind of puts to a test what you think is right in different scenarios. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about, but there's it's up to you kind of as a person, like which one you think is most relevant. And maybe you'll apply different ones in different cases, and that's okay. But like I said, there's no right answer here, unfortunately. So we just have to learn about kind of the different options and how to apply these theories to different scenarios. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on chapter 3.